Hi, this is Gerry Kayye. We're here at Integrate 2016 in Sydney, Australia. The first time that Rave Pubs has covered the show live. And I'm here with Gerry Wilkins. Gerry Wilkins is with AptoVision, and you live here in Sydney. So what do you think of the show?
Yeah, so far it's off to a great start. It's been amazing to watch Integrate develop over the last few years, and it's just gotten better and better. And I think this year it seems to be reaching its pinnacle. They're doing a great job.
Well, yeah, AptoVision's an interesting company because you're here at the show, but you're here in not just one place, you're in a bunch of places because your core technology is being used behind the scenes. Talk a little bit about what AptoVision does and what you guys sort of invented.
Certainly. So AptoVision is a developer of core technology for transporting high-resolution AV over IP. The difference is that we're doing it uncompressed, and therefore we're using 10 gigabit Ethernet networks. And that's a bit unusual because most of the AV over IP guys are doing compression. So here at this show, we have three of our customers, being IDK from Japan, ZV out of the US, and IMAG Systems, which is a local company out of Melbourne.
Yeah, and so basically for you to do AV over the network, in your case, you're doing it uncompressed, which means there's no loss in signal quality. But you have to use a 10 gig switch. Why is that?
Well, in order to use the uncompressed format, we have to have the bandwidth in a 10 gigabit switch or Ethernet. So in 1 gigabit you have a lot of compression and therefore latency, and in many applications and use cases latency is not acceptable. So we decided to go to the uncompressed market, and the bandwidth required is 10 gigabit.
So if you look at the entire commercial AV market right now, I mean certainly less than 1% of the systems put in are network based. But obviously there's a path that direction. I mean, I think everyone, if you asked any manufacturer of signal routing distribution products, they would all say that it's all going to the network. What's the path and how long is it going to take?
Well, I think it's already starting. I mean, we have use cases already where we're in sports stadiums, we're in medical facilities, we're in universities. We just did an enterprise installation here in Sydney for a law firm. And it was all because the IT administrator understood that with 10 gigabit, now they could have AV and IT on the same network, something that could not happen in the 1 gigabit world.
But if you're an integrator and you're getting into that segment of the market, or you're looking at at what point in time are the legacy analog and digital systems going to find themselves replaced by the network, if you had to kind of guess a roadmap, because I mean obviously you have a vested interest in saying sooner rather than later, but let's be honest. I mean, you've been in this industry for over 20 years. You're not gonna tell people something that's not true because your reputation is on the line. But what do you think is really the honest path to where we're going to see a significant minority or even a majority of those systems being network based?
Well, I think it's just a matter of time, as you say. It is going to be an evolving thing, and really it's going to come down to companies understanding that there is no more conflict, that you can actually share both AV and IT over a single network. But it has to be 10 gigabit because 1 gigabit just not adequate in that respect, not if you want uncompressed. And so you'll see the early adopters will be in the medical space where they really desire that low latency and high resolution. And from a timeline perspective, it's from now over the next 2 to 3 years, I think you'll see a real tipping point.
So you think within 3 years we'll see a significant minority or enough systems that were network based that every integrator will be doing something that way?
I do believe that's the case. I think all new infrastructure will be IP based, and as that starts to roll out, then you'll start to see the replacement of the old systems. And HD-based-T has some definitive limitations, and as you know, they've been the dominant technology for the last 8 or 9 years. And so as that stuff starts to hit its use by date, I think you'll see it replaced by IP based solutions.
Well, I think a lot of people would like to see HD-based-T replaced for a couple of reasons. Number one, it's really not network-based. And number two, the standards aren't really standard, right? I mean, when somebody puts a label HD-based-T on something, you don't know exactly what's going through the HD-based-T. It's 3-pay, 4-pay, 5-pay, whatever it is.
Yep.
So I think that I totally agree with. Now, do you have a specification on whose 10 gig routers you can use, or are you off the shelf anybody's routers?
We're predominantly off the shelf. It needs to be a layer 2 or layer 3 managed switch because we have to be able to multicast across the network. So as long as it meets the basic requirements of non-blocking and multicast, then we can go ahead and use it. So we're using Cisco, we're using Arista, Juniper, D-Link, Netgear, it just goes on and on. So really we don't have a specific switch requirement. It just needs to be a managed switch.
And do you have any sort of educational program going on right now to help the integrators in the industry get educated on what it means to have the impact of the network in AV, or is that something you're developing, or how can they get more information about what you're doing?
So yeah, in the background we're working on that. So AptoVision is a small company. We're only 4 years old. We're coming up very quickly, and one of the things is we've hired a guy who's focused on that strategic direction of the company, and one of those areas is obviously got to be training, because in order to convince the market this is a worthwhile path to follow, we need to educate them, and that's going to be a big part of our roadmap. So I think you'll see us starting to announce those programs probably at ISE early next year.
And of course, you can get more information at aptovision.com, right? And how many manufacturers do you have that are using your core technology?
So currently we have about 7 who are in production, and we've got another 10 or 12 who are in design. So I think that the number is growing very rapidly.
Okay, well, congratulations. It won our Product of the Year award at ISE 2 years ago. It's been recognized a couple other times at other shows because we're very impressed with the technology. We firmly believe, our organization firmly believes that's the future of our industry as well, AV over IP. And there's going to be other players. In fact, I wanted to ask you one question about the so-called other players. How does AVB fit into your roadmap? Can you handle AVB through the AptoVision core technology?
Yeah, absolutely. We can support AVB now. The only thing that we need is a customer who wants us to build it for them. Right? So we already have that ability, and in fact we can probably take some of the AVB stuff a little bit further, but it comes down to the customer case, right? So we're just a chipset manufacturer, so we need an OEM or brand to come along and say, hey, we want to do AVB, and we're ready to go now.
And I ask you that only because just in the last month, I've started to hear more about AVB again, where 2 years ago it was big and it kind of died off.
Yep.
And now we've got a couple of manufacturers that are saying they're going to do some video over AVB. So that'll be very interesting to see. Of course, AVB's pretty much dominantly been audio-based. So, well, thanks. I appreciate you joining me today. And of course, you want to get more information, go to AptoVision, aptovision.com, and we're going to check out the rest of the show. We got a long way to go. And thanks for joining me, Gerry. I appreciate it.
Great to see you, Gary. Thanks
you
for coming down to Australia.
Thank you. And we'll plan on coming every year. And of course, you can follow all our coverage here at Integrate 2016 at ravepubs.com.